September 27th, 2025. A 4-year-old boy vanishes from one of the most remote places on Earth. No witnesses. No body. No explanation. The largest search in South Australian history yields nothing. But then police drop a bombshell. The suspect isn't a stranger. It isn't a drifter. The suspect is family. A grandparent who lived under the same roof. But here's the question no one can answer. Why would a grandmother harm her own grandchild? And why would she bury the truth in the red dirt of the outback? What happened to Gus Lamont? Welcome to the true crime documentary that unravels one of Australia's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. The case of Gus Lamont has captivated the world. A sweet-faced 4-year-old boy with dirty blonde hair and a mischievous grin. A family torn apart by suspicion. A police force that believes the answer lies buried somewhere on a 60,000-hectare sheep station. But what really happened on that warm September evening when Gus Lamont disappeared from the face of the earth? Let's start at the beginning. Because to understand this case, you have to understand where it happened. Oak Park Station sits 43 kilometers south of Yunta, South Australia, a sprawling sheep station that covers roughly 60,000 hectares. That's about 470 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, it's an area roughly twice the size of Edinburgh, Scotland. 3.5 times the size of Manchester. The red dirt, the harsh sun, the isolation. This is land that swallows secrets. And in this vast, inhospitable landscape lived 4-year-old Augustus Gus Lamont. A boy full of energy, known for his love of animals, his bright spirit, and the way he lit up a room. On the surface, it was an idyllic childhood, running free on the family property with his parents, Josh Lamont and Jess Murray, and his grandmothers, Josie Murray and Shannon Murray. But beneath that quiet outback life, something was about to go terribly wrong. The last 30 minutes. The timeline of September 27th, 2025 is critical to understanding this case. And here's where the story takes its first dark turn. According to what we now know, Gus was playing outside on a mound of dirt near the homestead. It's his grandmother who initially looks after him. But there's a critical gap here, about 30 minutes. One grandmother was caring for his younger brother inside, while Gus played outside. The grandmother tending to Gus, depending on which account you believe, stepped inside briefly. For 30 minutes, little Gus was alone. At some point, around 5:30 p.m., his grandmother, Josie Murray, recounts returning to the homestead after working with sheep. Another grandparent, Shannon Murray, informed them Gus had been playing outside near what the family calls the bomb shelter plain. But when they searched, there was no trace of him. Josie Murray, we said to Shannon, "When did you last see him?" And she said, 5 o'clock. And so, in that half-hour time frame, he disappeared. A half hour. That's all it took for a 4-year-old boy to vanish into thin air from one of the most isolated properties on Earth. The family's first instinct was logical. They knew the terrain. They knew the dangers. Josie Murray. We immediately were a little bit concerned about the cellar we were building because it was possible he could have fallen down there. But the cellar was searched. Nothing. Not a drop of blood on the concrete floor. No sign that Gus had ever been there. The panic escalated. Family members scattered across the enormous property, checking dams, water tanks, sheds, and neighboring buildings. By 8 p.m., the family contacted police. A search was launched that would become one of the most extensive in South Australian history. The search that found nothing. When authorities arrived, they found a nightmare scenario. A remote location. No witnesses. No timeline. And a family whose story, as they would later discover, didn't quite add up. Emergency services, state emergency service volunteers, Australian Defence Force personnel, and Indigenous trackers scoured the region. Ground crews, aerial support, drones, everything modern search and rescue technology could offer was deployed. The search zone expanded. Approximately 470 square kilometers around Oak Park Station homestead was combed. They drained dams, searched mine shafts, and crisscrossed the property repeatedly. But they found nothing. No trace of Gus Lamont. No body. No clothing. No belongings. Nothing. By late October, the search efforts were wound down. A 12-member task force, appropriately named Task Force Horizon, took over. It was time to investigate in a different direction. Here's what they found. The first significant red flag. As Task Force Horizon sifted through the statements given by family members, they identified something troubling. Inconsistencies. Discrepancies. Specifically, the timeline of Gus's disappearance didn't hold up. Darren Fielka, a person who resides at Oak Park Station, has withdrawn their support for police and is no longer cooperating with us. Let that sink in. Someone at the property, someone who lived with Gus, stopped talking to police. And then, on February 5th, 2026, the case was declared a major crime. Police revealed they now believed Gus was dead. Not missing. Dead. Darren Fielka. What I can say, however, is that we'll continue to thoroughly and meticulously investigate the disappearance of Gus until we get an outcome. Nothing is off the table. The parents, Gus Lamont and Josie Murray, were not suspects. Police were very clear about that. But someone else in the family was. A grandparent. And here's where the case takes its most shocking turn. February 5th, 2026. More than 4 months since Gus vanished. The case had already become one of South Australia's most exhaustive missing person investigations. But on this day, everything changed. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka stepped up to the microphones and delivered a statement that shattered the public's understanding of this case. Darren Fielka, a person who resides at Oak Park Station, has withdrawn their support for police and is no longer cooperating with us. Let that sink in. Someone living under the same roof as Gus Lamont stopped talking to police. Darren Fielka, the person who has withdrawn their cooperation, is now considered a suspect in the disappearance of Gus. Fielka was careful, precise. He stressed that Gus's parents were not suspects, but the implication was unmistakable. A family member, a grandparent, was now the focus of a major crime investigation. The case was officially declared a major crime. And then came the detail that made this case unforgettable. Darren Fielka. Investigators don't believe, now, that Gus is alive. Police had told the family to prepare for the worst. They believed the 4-year-old was dead. And they believed someone in his own family knew exactly where his body was hidden. The 3 theories collapse. From the beginning, Task Force Horizon pursued 3 possible explanations. The first, Gus simply wandered off into the unforgiving outback. A 4-year-old boy, lost in 470 square kilometers of red dirt and scrubland. It was the most innocent explanation, the one the family clung to in those first desperate days. But police systematically dismantled that theory. Darren Fielka. We have no evidence, physical or otherwise, to suggest that Gus has merely wandered off from the Park homestead. Commissioner Grant Stevens went even further. Grant Stevens. There has not been one single piece of evidence during that searching exercise, the most extensive search, I think arguably in the history of South Australia, that has given us any indication that he did wander off. They drained dams. They searched mine shafts. They deployed Aboriginal trackers who read the land better than anyone. Nothing. No clothing. No hair. No blood. No evidence that Gus had taken a single step away from that homestead. The second theory, abduction. Could someone have driven onto the property and taken Gus? In theory, yes. But this was one of the most isolated locations on Earth. Darren Fielka. There were no vehicles foreign to the area at Oak Park Station that have been identified by either the property owners themselves or the neighboring properties at the time that Gus went missing. Fielka explained that if a vehicle had approached, dust would have been visible for miles. The gates were locked. The neighbors saw nothing. No foreign tire tracks were found entering or leaving the property. That theory was also ruled out. Darren Fielka. We are very confident is very, very unlikely. That left one theory. Someone known to Gus was involved in his disappearance and presumed death. The suspect. Police wouldn't name the suspect publicly, but the pieces fit together. Someone living at Oak Park Station. A family member. Not the parents. The grandparents, Josie Murray and Shannon Murray, continued to live at the property. In February 2026, they issued a statement through lawyers, saying they were absolutely devastated someone at the station was a suspect. But by March, communications had changed. Police confirmed that two family members were only communicating with investigators through their legal representatives. Then came June 2026, and a grandmother broke her silence. Josie Murray. They've said that they don't think I hurt him. They think that I buried him. 75-year-old Josie Murray sat down with 7 News Spotlight and revealed what police had told her. Josie Murray. That's one of the theories they're working on, and, as I say, for so many reasons, it's ludicrous. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you do that to yourself when if he'd had an accident you'd just go, well, as much as we hate it and everything, he's had an accident. We've got to deal with it. The interview was emotional. Raw. Murray insisted she and her former partner Shannon were innocent. Josie Murray. We absolutely know we're innocent. We know that we couldn't and didn't do anything, and the hard part obviously is to convince other people of that. There's no way of completely convincing people. Murray described the toll the investigation had taken. Josie Murray. I'd be in tears, and I know Shannon said the same thing, that you'd just suddenly be hit by the horror, the enormity of this. And then to be accused of doing something like this is just, you could not wish a more horrible experience on anyone. But here's the question that haunts this case. Why would police suspect a grandmother of burying her own grandson? Inconsistencies and discrepancies. Police were careful with their words, but they revealed enough. Darren Fielka. There have been inconsistencies and discrepancies relating to the timeline and version of events. The timeline was the heart of the problem. Police had said Gus was last seen by his grandmother at 5 p.m. He was reported missing 3 hours later. Detectives identified a critical gap, a 30-minute window where the story didn't quite fit. Let's reconstruct that evening. September 27, 2025. AFL Grand Final Night. The remote homestead was quiet. Family members had been working the property. According to the account police were given, one grandmother was inside caring for Gus's younger brother. The other, Josie Murray, according to her interview, was working with sheep. Gus was outside, playing in the sand with a little shovel in his hand. Alone. Josie Murray. We said to Shannon, "When did you last see him?" And she said, 5 o'clock. And so, in that half-hour time frame, he disappeared. But when detectives probed deeper, the story shifted. Then came the search warrant. In mid-January 2026, police executed a search warrant at Oak Park Station. They seized a vehicle, a motorcycle, and multiple electronic devices. All were subjected to forensic testing. But the results? Nothing. Darren Fielka. No evidence has been located as a result of that testing that provides any further lines of inquiry that might assist us in relation to Gus' disappearance. The results also didn't exclude anyone from the investigation. The net was closing, but it hadn't caught anything yet. A grandmother's defense. In her television interview, Josie Murray presented her own theory, and she pointed to evidence she believed police had overlooked. Josie Murray. I thought that strange too, and I started to think almost immediately, I wonder if someone's come in? And all the time I was thinking there's a chance he's been taken by someone. Murray claimed she noticed an old bed frame had been moved after Gus's disappearance. A weather station had been displaced. And she saw wheel tracks, small tracks, that seemed to come from a medium-sized car passing both locations. Josie Murray. A child would not be able to shift it. She also claimed she found a footprint in the mud near one of the property's dams. Josie Murray interview. I saw a footprint in one of the dam's muddy shores, but police dismissed it as being made by a diver. Police had previously said a footprint was found approximately 500 meters from the homestead 3 days after Gus disappeared. It was the only potential physical clue in the entire search. Josie Murray interview. He must have had tiny feet. But police later ruled out the footprint as unrelated to Gus's disappearance. They wouldn't explain how they reached that conclusion. Murray's frustration was palpable. Josie Murray interview. I was frankly horrified at the number of vehicles that were parked around our house because we hadn't actually seen them come in. My immediate thought was, my God, they've destroyed any chance of tracking him. She argued that the initial search response compromised the evidence. Josie Murray interview. That was a mistake to come in with all those vehicles so early when they should have actually got the tracker guy from Port Augusta while there was still a chance to find the tracks. He didn't get there until 2 or 3 days after Gus went missing. Murray's theory was simple. Someone came onto the property, took Gus, and left. She pointed to the moved bed frame and the small tire tracks as proof. But police had already considered and rejected that possibility. Darren Fielka, archival. There was no dust, no sighting of any vehicle at the time Gus went missing. There's been no foreign tracks located arriving or leaving the property. The silencer and the eagle. There are 2 more details that muddy this case. Strange details. Details that seem like distractions but might mean something. First, Josie Murray was fined $10,500 by the Adelaide Magistrates Court in June 2026. The charge? Possession of a gun silencer at the family property. Police were quick to emphasize the silencer matter was unrelated to Gus's disappearance. But the timing couldn't have been worse for Murray's public image. A grandmother suspected of covering up a child's death and found with a gun silencer on her property? The optics were devastating. Josie Murray, interview. Hypothetical defense. It's unrelated. It has nothing to do with Gus. True or not, the silencer charge cemented the public's suspicion. Second, a family friend, Bill Harbison, offered an alternative theory so bizarre it made headlines. Bill Harbison's statement reenacted. A wedge-tailed eagle can pick up a 20, 25-kilogram kangaroo and take it without much difficulty. Gus was 13 or 14 kilograms, so a mature wedge-tailed eagle would find that quite comfortable. A wedge-tailed eagle. An Australian bird of prey large enough to snatch a small child. It was a theory that captured the public's imagination. But it was also impossible to prove. No witnesses reported an eagle attack. No feathers or remains were found. Police didn't take the theory seriously. But here's the thing about this case. Every theory feels impossible. A 4-year-old boy vanished from the middle of nowhere. No body. No witnesses. No explanation. A wedge-tailed eagle might be more plausible than a grandmother burying her grandson. So, where does that leave us? February 6, 2026. One day after police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime and revealed a suspect had stopped cooperating, the Murray family fought back. They issued a joint statement through their legal representatives. Joint statement. We are absolutely devastated by the media release of Sapple Major Crime. The family has cooperated fully with the investigation and want nothing more than to find Gus and reunite him with his mom and dad. The statement directly contradicted what Detective Superintendent Fielka had told the public. He had said a person living at Oak Park Station had withdrawn their support and was no longer cooperating. The family claimed otherwise. Both grandmothers, Josie Murray and Shannon Murray, had hired high-profile criminal lawyers. Josie Murray was represented by criminal lawyer Andrew E.Y. Shannon Murray was represented by defense lawyer Casey Isaacs. These were not ordinary attorneys. These were lawyers who defended serious criminal allegations. The fact that both grandmothers had retained them so quickly spoke volumes. The statement was clear. The family was devastated. But the lawyers also made it clear their clients would not be participating in interviews or commenting further. The silence that followed was deafening. The property, a world apart. To truly understand this case, you need to understand Oak Park Station. It's a world apart. Literally. The property sits 43 kilometers south of Yunta, South Australia, a tiny town with a population of less than 100 people. Getting there means driving down a rough track from the barrier highway. The isolation is crushing. Oak Park Station covers approximately 60,000 hectares, roughly 470 square kilometers. That's an area almost twice the size of Edinburgh. It's a private kingdom of red dust and harsh scrubland. The homestead sits in the middle of this emptiness. It's a simple structure, purpose-built for a life that most Australians will never understand. Life on a working sheep station is tough. It's punishing. It's isolated. In the days after Gus vanished, authorities revealed something significant about the family who lived there. Superintendent Mark Cyrus, archival, reenacted. They're a very private family, and they don't get many visitors up here. It's very tough for them. They like the isolation. They liked the isolation. That's what police said. But when your 4-year-old grandson disappears in the middle of that isolation, the absence of witnesses becomes a nightmare for investigators. Police pointed out that the property had locked gates. This was critical to their theory. If a vehicle had approached, it would have had to navigate multiple locked gates. Dust would have been visible for miles. Darren Fielka, archival, reenacted. There was no dust, no sighting of any vehicle at the time Gus went missing. There's been no foreign tracks located arriving or leaving the property. According to police, no unauthorized vehicle entered. No stranger approached. The gates remained locked. And somewhere in this vast, desolate landscape, a 4-year-old boy vanished. The search that became a recovery. The search for Gus Lamont was one of the largest in South Australian history. The scale was staggering. Emergency services. State Emergency Service volunteers. Australian Defence Force personnel. Indigenous trackers. Mounted officers. Drones. Helicopters. The search covered up to 94 square kilometers. Dams were drained. Mine shafts searched. The homestead and outbuildings scoured repeatedly. For 9 days, the search operation continued. Then, grimly, it shifted from a rescue to a recovery operation. Assistant Commissioner Ian Parrott, archival, reenacted. Gus may not have survived due to the passage of time, his age, and the nature of the terrain he is missing in. But even the shift to recovery yielded nothing. A search crew member, Jason O'Connell, who had walked the property with Gus's father, spoke with devastating honesty. Jason O'Connell, archival, reenacted. My heart breaks for the father. It's been searched. Gus is not there. O'Connell, a former SES volunteer with tracking experience, said he'd never seen a case like this. Not a single trace of a missing person. Jason O'Connell. I just don't get how he vanished like that. That question has haunted investigators ever since. By late October, the formal search operation was wound down. A 12-member task force, Task Force Horizon, took over. It was time for police to stop looking with their eyes. It was time to start looking with their minds. The previous disappearance. And then came a revelation that changed everything. In her 7 News Spotlight interview, Josie Murray disclosed something deeply disturbing. Gus had gone missing before. Josie Murray interview. Gus' other grandparent, Sean, had taken him down to the shearer's quarters while Jess and I were out mustering, and he had wandered off. Sean couldn't find him when she was going to come home. A previous disappearance. In the same vast property. With the same grandmother. Was this a simple case of a curious child wandering off? Or was it something more significant? Police seized on the detail. But there was something else Murray revealed. Something that gave a glimpse into the chaos of that September night. She remembered arriving back at the homestead around 5:30 p.m. after working with sheep. She said Shannon told them Gus had been playing outside near what the family calls the bomb shelter plain. But when they searched, Gus had vanished. Josie Murray. We said to Shannon, "When did you last see him?" And she said, 5 o'clock. And so in that half-hour time frame, he disappeared. A half-hour window. That was all it took. The family's first thought was the cellar. They were building one nearby. They feared Gus might have fallen in. Josie Murray. We immediately were a little bit concerned about the cellar we were building because it was possible he could have fallen down there. They searched it immediately. Nothing. No sign that Gus had been there. Josie Murray. There was no sign that he'd been down there. No blood on the concrete floor, nothing. No blood. That detail mattered. If Gus had died in an accident in that cellar, there would have been evidence. There was nothing. The grandmother's theory. In her 7 News Spotlight appearance, Josie Murray laid out what she believed happened to her grandson. And she pointed fingers, not at herself, but at someone else. Josie Murray. I started to think almost immediately, I wonder if someone's come in? And all the time I was thinking there's a chance he's been taken by someone. She pointed to what she considered suspicious signs. An old bedstead that appeared to have been moved. Small wool tracks near the area where Gus had been playing. Josie Murray. A child would not be able to shift it. She also told police about a footprint she found near one of the property's dams. Josie Murray. I saw a footprint in one of the dam's muddy shores, but police dismissed it as being made by a diver. But police had already publicly rejected the abduction theory. Let's revisit why. Number 1. No foreign vehicles were ever identified entering or leaving the property. The gates were locked. The dust was undisturbed. Number 2. Police interviewed everyone with any connection to the area, neighbors, contractors, employees. All were discounted. Number 3. The isolation of the property meant that any approach would have been visible from miles away. Darren Fielka, archival, reenacted. We are very confident abduction is very, very unlikely. But Murray wasn't satisfied. Josie Murray. We haven't got a body, we haven't got a live body, we haven't got a dead body. We have no idea quite where he is, but we feel that yes, he has been taken. It was a desperate plea. A grandmother screaming into the void, insisting she had nothing to do with her grandson's disappearance. But police had their own theory. And it was devastating. By May 2026, Task Force Horizon had returned to Oak Park Station 11 times. 11 separate searches. 11 times they walked the same red dirt, searched the same dams, combed the same creek beds. And 11 times they found nothing. The scale of the operation was staggering. Emergency services, state emergency service volunteers, Australian Defence Force personnel, Indigenous trackers, all had been deployed across the 60,000-hectare property. That's roughly 470 square kilometers. To put it in perspective, an area double the size of Edinburgh, Scotland. 3.5 times the size of Manchester. Artificial intelligence was used to analyze imagery covering hundreds of kilometers of rugged terrain. Dams were drained. Mine shafts searched. Every outbuilding scoured. But the red dirt held its secrets tight. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. This is the 11th time that Task Force Horizon has been at Oak Park Station conducting a search. Unfortunately, we have not uncovered any other evidence that helps us locate Gus. The searches had become demoralizing, even for seasoned detectives who had seen their share of difficult cases. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. We have invested a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of emotional energy into this. It's a tough job, it's relentless, it's demoralizing at times, but we're not going to let up. But there was something else in Fielka's voice. A grim acceptance that time was running out. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. The longer this goes on, the closer we get to not finding him. A sliver of hope. In late May 2026, something changed. Heavy rains swept across the region. Creeks swelled. Waterways carved new paths through the landscape. Police saw a sliver of hope. They called it an opportunity. 17 detectives and specialist Star Group officers returned to Oak Park Station. This time, they concentrated their search on over 30 kilometers of waterways, washaways, and creek beds. The theory was simple. Heavy rain might have moved soil, peeled back vegetation, or exposed something that had been hidden for months. It was a long shot. But at this stage, every long shot was worth taking. Bores and wells were examined. The dams were checked again. Every possible hiding place was scrutinized. And again, nothing. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. Again, unfortunately, without any success, but they needed to be done. The investigation had become a test of endurance. A battle against the outback itself. The public's help. The public had not forgotten Gus Lamont. In the 8 months following his disappearance, police received a staggering 836 separate pieces of information. 527 calls to Crime Stoppers. More than 200 to the Police Communications Center. Over 60 letters. Over 60 emails. Every single one was followed up. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. It has all been followed up, it has all been investigated, and some of those inquiries have extended interstate. More than 500 people were identified as being in or around Oak Park Station on the day Gus vanished. Task Force members contacted every single one of them. But here's the devastating reality. Every person contacted so far has been ruled out. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. All of the people that we have contacted so far have been discounted as being involved in any way in Gus' disappearance. No other suspects. No other persons of interest. The net had narrowed to one person, and one person only. The grandparent remains a suspect. On May 28, 2026, Detective Superintendent Fielka confirmed what many had suspected. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference reenacted. One of the grandparents of Gus remains a suspect in this investigation. He would not elaborate. He would not take questions about that person. But the message was clear. The investigation had not moved beyond the family. It was locked on the grandmothers. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference reenacted. At this time, no other suspects or persons of interest have been identified in this investigation. The forensic testing of items seized in the January search warrant had also yielded nothing. A vehicle, a motorcycle, electronic devices, all subjected to thorough forensic examination. The results? They didn't produce any new leads. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference reenacted. No evidence has been located as a result of that testing that provides any further lines of inquiry that might assist us in relation to Gus' disappearance. But there was a darker implication in Fielka's words. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference reenacted. These examinations have also not excluded anybody from the investigation either. The forensic testing hadn't cleared anyone. The suspect remained a suspect. And the case remained a major crime investigation. The parents' agony. While the investigation tightened around the grandmothers, Gus's parents were left in a state of unbearable limbo. Their son was gone. Their family was shattered. And someone they trusted, someone who lived under the same roof, was a suspect in his disappearance. In February 2026, Gus Lamont and Josie Murray released a public plea that cut through the noise of the investigation. Gus and Josie Lamont, statement reenacted. Our lives have been shattered, and every moment without him is unbearable. They begged for information. They pleaded with the public to come forward. Gus and Josie Lamont, statement reenacted. We know someone out there may have information. If someone knows what happened, we are pleading with that person, or anyone who may have seen or heard anything, to please come forward. Their message was simple. They wanted two things: their son back and the truth. Gus and Josie Lamont, statement reenacted. All we want is to bring Gus home and understand what happened to our beautiful boy. Police were clear. Gus's parents were not suspects. They were victims, caught in a nightmare of suspicion, grief, and unanswered questions. The forensics, what they found, what they didn't. One of the most baffling aspects of this case is the complete absence of physical evidence. Police have found nothing. Let's list what they don't have. No body. No clothing. No hair. No fibers. No blood. No DNA evidence. No video footage. No foreign tire tracks. No witnesses. The only potential clue was a single footprint found approximately 500 meters from the homestead 3 days after Gus vanished. But that footprint was dismissed by police. It was subsequently found not to be related to Gus. Josie Murray claimed she saw a footprint in one of the dam's muddy shores, one that looked small enough to be Gus's. But police told her it was made by a diver. Josie Murray, interview reenacted. He must have had tiny feet. Whether that footprint ever existed, and whether it could have been evidence, remains a matter of dispute. The silencer. In June 2026, Josie Murray faced another blow. The Adelaide Magistrates Court fined her $10,500 for possession of a gun silencer at the family property. Police were quick to clarify. The silencer matter was completely unrelated to Gus's disappearance. But the timing couldn't have been worse. A grandmother suspected of covering up a child's death, caught with a weapon accessory designed to muffle gunshots. The public's imagination ran wild. Was there a connection? Police said no. But in a case with no evidence, every odd detail becomes a talking point. Every inconsistency becomes a lead. And every piece of bad optics fuels the speculation. Bill Harbison stepped up to the microphones in the days after Gus vanished. A semi-retired equine vet. A family friend. Someone who had known the Murrays for decades. He had a theory. and it was unlike anything the public had heard before. Bill Harbison's statement reenacted. A wedge-tailed eagle can pick up a 20, 25-kilogram kangaroo and take it without much difficulty. Gus was 13 or 14 kilograms, so a mature wedge-tailed eagle would find that quite comfortable. The theory went viral. Overnight, the image of a majestic bird of prey snatching a 4-year-old boy captured the global imagination. It was the kind of theory that sounded almost plausible, something from a horror movie set in the unforgiving Australian outback. But experts quickly dismantled it. Dr. Simon Cherryman, one of Australia's leading experts on wedge-tailed eagles, told the media it was extremely unlikely an eagle could have been involved. The math didn't work. The maximum weight an adult wedge-tailed eagle can carry is around 5 kilograms, roughly its own body weight. Gus weighed 13 or 14 kilograms, nearly 3 times that. Dr. Simon Cherryman. Expert statement reenacted. Most 4-year-old boys weigh over 16 kilograms, which is a weight that an eagle would not physically be capable of carrying. Cherryman explained that while eagles do occasionally kill prey larger than themselves, they don't carry it. They kill it on the ground and eat it where it falls. If Gus had been attacked by an eagle, the body would have been found. Dr. Simon Cherryman. Expert statement reenacted. One would anticipate this is something that would have been detected during the multiple searches undertaken following Gus's disappearance. South Australian falcon expert Paul Wilcock was even more emphatic. He dismissed the theory as 100% impossible. He told reporters. Paul Wilcock. Expert statement reenacted. If you had 2 eagles dragging him, you'd see the drag. It just can't happen. The hidden motive, discrimination claims. Bill Harbison didn't stop with the eagle theory. He made an even more explosive claim. He accused police of discrimination. Josie Murray is a transgender woman. Harbison claimed she was being targeted by police not because of evidence, but because of who she is. Bill Harbison's statement reenacted. Josie is such an honest, caring person. She would never, ever hurt anybody. She's being targeted simply because she's transgender. It was a powerful accusation, one that forced the public to confront a difficult question. Was Josie Murray's identity clouding police judgment? The Murrays had lived quiet, isolated lives on Oak Park Station. They weren't in the public eye. But when the case went global, their private lives were dragged into the spotlight. Harbison's claim added a layer of controversy to an already explosive case. Police, he suggested, had chosen the easiest target, an elderly, transgender grandmother living on a remote property. But police vehemently denied the accusation. They maintained that the investigation was based purely on evidence and inconsistencies in the timeline. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference reenacted. We have a suspect. That suspect is someone who lives at Oak Park Station. All other persons of interest have been ruled out. Despite Harbison's claims, police didn't budge. The grandmother remained the primary suspect. No other suspects were identified. The family's statement. On February 6, 2026, the Murray family issued a statement that would define their public position for months to come. It was released through their lawyers, a deliberate strategy that signaled they were preparing for a legal battle. Joint statement, on-screen text. We are absolutely devastated by the media release of Sapple Major Crime. The family has cooperated fully with the investigation and want nothing more than to find Gus and reunite him with his mom and dad. The statement directly contradicted police claims. Detective Superintendent Fielka had said a person at Oak Park Station had withdrawn their support and was no longer cooperating. The family insisted otherwise. Both grandmothers hired high-profile legal representation. Josie Murray, Andrew E.Y., a leading Adelaide criminal lawyer. Shannon Murray, Casey Isaacs, a prominent defense solicitor. The fact that both grandmothers had retained serious criminal lawyers spoke volumes. They were preparing for the possibility of charges. Shannon Murray's lawyer, Casey Isaacs, stated his client was cooperating through her solicitor. It was a carefully worded phrase. Not cooperating directly, cooperating through a lawyer. A legal firewall. And Andrew E.Y., representing Josie Murray, told reporters there would be no further comment at this stage. The silence was strategic. In a criminal investigation, the most dangerous thing you can do is speak without your lawyer present. The silencer, a conviction that fueled suspicion. In June 2026, Josie Murray faced a new blow. The Adelaide Magistrates Court convicted her of possessing a gun silencer at Oak Park Station. The fine, $10,500. Police were quick to clarify. The silencer charge was entirely unrelated to Gus's disappearance. It was a separate matter. But the public didn't see it that way. A grandmother already suspected of burying her grandson, now convicted of possessing a silencer, a device that muffles gunfire. The optics were devastating. Was there a connection? Police said no. But in a case with no evidence, every detail is scrutinized. Every coincidence becomes a clue. And every misstep fuels the speculation. This is the reality of the Gus Lamont case. The lack of evidence creates a vacuum. And into that vacuum rushes theories, accusations, and suspicion. The previous disappearance, a pattern or coincidence. In her 7 News Spotlight interview, Josie Murray revealed something that sent shockwaves through the investigation. Gus had disappeared from Oak Park Station before. Josie Murray, interview, reenacted. Sean had taken him down to the Shearers' quarters while Jess and I were out mustering, and he had wandered off. Sean couldn't find him when she was going to come home. It was a chilling revelation. The same property, the same grandmother, another disappearance. Murray described how she had to search for Gus and eventually found him. Josie Murray, interview, reenacted. I was the one who found him. The police haven't publicly commented on whether this previous disappearance influenced their investigation. But it's difficult to imagine detectives didn't take notice. Was it a pattern? A warning sign? Or just a curious 4-year-old exploring the outback? The 30-minute window. The timeline remains the heart of this case. Gus was last seen at 5 p.m. on September 27, 2025. By 5:30 p.m., he was gone. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, archival, reenacted. There have been inconsistencies and discrepancies relating to the timeline and version of events. What happened in that 30-minute window? That's the question that haunts detectives. The family's theory. Gus wandered off. He was an adventurous child. He had previously walked away from the property. It was a plausible explanation for a 4-year-old in unfamiliar terrain. But police rejected that theory. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. We have no evidence, physical or otherwise, to suggest that Gus has merely wandered off from the Park homestead. If Gus had wandered off and died in the outback, from exposure, heat stroke, or dehydration, where was the body? The search had been enormous. The most extensive in South Australian history. Nothing. Police also ruled out abduction. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted. There were no vehicles foreign to the area at Oak Park Station that have been identified by either the property owners themselves or the neighboring properties at the time that Gus went missing. That left one theory: family involvement. And specifically, a grandparent. It was the search that was supposed to change everything. May 2026. Heavy rains had swept across the region, carving new channels through the red earth, washing away layers of soil that had remained untouched for months. Police saw an opportunity. If Gus's body had been hidden in the outback, perhaps the weather had finally revealed what the search teams could not find. 17 detectives and specialist Star Group officers returned to Oak Park Station. This time, they concentrated on over 30 kilometers of waterways, washaways, and creek beds. Bores and wells were examined. Dams were checked again. The theory was simple. Heavy rain might have moved soil, peeled back vegetation, or exposed something that had been hidden. It was a long shot. But at this stage, every long shot was worth taking. But the outback held its secrets tight. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. This is the 11th time that Task Force Horizon has been at Oak Park Station conducting a search. Unfortunately, we have not uncovered any evidence that helps us locate Gus. 11 searches. 11 times they had walked the same red dirt, searched the same dams, combed the same creek beds. And 11 times, nothing. A demoralizing reality. The investigators were tired. The emotional weight of the case was crushing them, and they weren't hiding it. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. We have invested a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of emotional energy into this. It's a tough job, it's relentless, it's demoralizing at times, but we're not going to let up. There was a resignation in Fielka's voice, a grim acceptance that time was running out. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. The longer this goes on, the closer we get to not finding him. 8 months had passed since Gus vanished. A 4-year-old boy doesn't survive 8 months in the outback. Police had already told the family to prepare for the worst, that Gus was dead. They were searching for a body, not a child. The forensics that found nothing. In January 2026, Task Force Horizon executed a search warrant at Oak Park Station. They seized a vehicle, a motorcycle, and several electronic devices. All were subjected to thorough forensic testing. But again, nothing. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. No evidence has been located as a result of that testing that provides any further lines of inquiry that might assist us in relation to Gus's disappearance. But there was a darker implication in Fielka's words. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. These examinations have also not excluded anybody from the investigation either. The forensic testing hadn't cleared anyone. The suspect remained a suspect. And the case remained a major crime investigation. The 500 witnesses, all cleared. Police had a massive task ahead of them. They identified more than 500 people who were in and around Oak Park Station on the day Gus vanished. Task Force members contacted every single one. But every single one has been ruled out. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. All of the people that we have contacted so far have been discounted as being involved in any way in Gus's disappearance. That list is now nearly exhausted. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. There's not many people left on that list. No other suspects. No other persons of interest. The net had narrowed to one person, and one person only. What police have ruled out. Let's be precise about what police have ruled out in this investigation. The wandering theory. Commissioner Grant Stevens said there has not been one single piece of evidence that we have located during that searching exercise, the most extensive search, I think arguably in the history of South Australia, that has given us any indication that he did wander off. The abduction theory. Detective Superintendent Fielka said, there is no evidence to suggest Gus has been abducted. There were no foreign vehicles identified. The gates were locked. The dust was undisturbed. The drowning theory. Police have a large degree of confidence that Gus did not drown in the dams or water courses on the property. The mine shaft theory. All mine shafts were searched. So what remains? The family involvement theory. Specifically, a grandparent. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. One of the grandparents of Gus remains a suspect in this investigation. At this time, no other suspects or persons of interest have been identified. The grandmother's legal strategy. By March 2026, communication had changed dramatically. Police confirmed that 2 family members were only communicating through their legal representatives. Both grandmothers had hired high-profile criminal lawyers. Josie Murray, Andrew E.Y., a leading Adelaide criminal lawyer. Shannon Murray, Casey Isaacs, a prominent defense solicitor. In February 2026, they had issued a statement together. Joint statement, on-screen text, based on reports. We are absolutely devastated by the media release of Sapple Major Crime. The family has cooperated fully with the investigation and want nothing more than to find Gus and reunite him with his mom and dad. But by March, communication was entirely through lawyers. A legal firewall had been erected. The grandmothers were preparing for the possibility of charges. The silencer conviction. In June 2026, Josie Murray was convicted of possessing a gun silencer at Oak Park Station. The fine was $10,500. Police were quick to clarify. The silencer matter was unrelated to Gus's disappearance. But the damage was done. A grandmother already suspected of burying her grandson, now convicted of possessing a weapon accessory designed to muffle gunfire. The optics were devastating. The public's imagination ran wild. The parents' agony. While police pursued the grandparent theory, Gus's parents were left in a state of unbearable limbo. Josh Lamont and Jess Murray were not suspects. But their son was gone, their family was shattered, and someone they trusted was a suspect in his disappearance. Josh and Jess Lamont statement, reenacted based on reports. Our lives have been shattered, and every moment without him is unbearable. They begged for answers. Josh and Gus Lamont statement, reenacted based on reports. If someone knows what happened, we are pleading with that person, or anyone who may have seen or heard anything, to please come forward. Detective Superintendent Fielka described their state. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka, press conference, reenacted based on reports. They are riding a pretty emotional roller coaster.